Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now I recently won this in an eBay auction for £170, about $230 or 195 euros. This rather compact gaming PC was listed as faulty because, according to the previous owner, it would turn on for a couple of minutes before shutting off and essentially becoming unresponsive. Aside from its stated mechanical flaws, it's in pretty good condition. A few marks here and there and a couple of little dings, but certainly one of the cleaner systems I've purchased for this channel. Sometimes we end up with more dust than PC, or what is essentially a spider's nest. We're missing the motherboard I/O shield and a PCIe slot cover, but these could very well be the least of our problems. First things first, let's get the case open and remove the paper that's been shoved in here for packaging purposes. Just 3 screws to remove here before we can lift the side of this lovely compact case off. Pretty cool to see the old Wraith Max or Prism cooler here too. I think the difference is that the fan blades light up with the Prism, so we'll know exactly what this cooler is soon. Also, call me crazy, but I don't trust a power supply with coloured connectors. I see some green and red here on the cables. Now this probably sounds ridiculous, but the last PSU I had with coloured connectors popped in my face. So we will proceed with caution. Oops, I almost forgot this piece of paper tucked under the graphics card fan. It's looking pretty good on the inside here as well, a fairly compact enclosure but still a bit of space to tinker with the cables. I found a handle for it in the box as well, so I attached that for the fact that I'm very prone to losing things, so I thought we may as well get this done now. Very nice. Alright, time to turn this thing on. Stand clear, chaps. Well, no explosions today, so that's good. There was a weird scratchy noise, but I think there is a cable stuck underneath the GPU getting caught in the fan. Yeah, it was. I just moved it and the noise stopped. That was a pretty easy fix. Now, I'd always recommend testing any PC you buy online before tinkering with it, even if you do buy one that's listed as faulty, with the intention of fixing it up. It makes troubleshooting easier if you know what is and isn't working from the start. This booted up just fine, straight into the BIOS. We have a Ryzen 1800X in here, an 8-core 16-thread CPU, one of the first Ryzen CPUs in fact. This launched back in March 2017 for $499 US. Temperatures look okay. We also have 16GB of DDR4 RAM in here, 2 8GB sticks, and we'll enable DOCP to see what speeds we have. 3000 MHz, not bad. The motherboard itself is an Asus B450MA2, which is fine, but I think we're best sticking with the stock clock speeds here. This system came with a single 128GB SATA SSD with Windows 11 installed as well, but we will be needing more space later for testing our games, so I will swap this drive out a bit later on in the video. Before we can do any of that though, it seems as though we are experiencing the dreaded shutdown issue. I don't know if I caught this in time. It's already booted like 4 times, but nothing has reappeared on the screen. The system just shut down and then restarted. As much as I'd love to say I'm right about it being the power supply, we'll give it the benefit of the doubt for now. Let's see what else could be causing issues in here. I'll get the PSU out of the way for the time being just to better fit my fat hands inside this case. This is as simple as removing 2 screws from the side, pulling away the front panel and lifting the whole PSU mount out of its 4 slots. So we have a Colink PSU up front here. I've definitely heard of them. I've probably used 1 or 2 over the last decade or so. I won't write this off for now. I'll keep it as a test bench backup after this video to see how it handles my more power hungry GPU collection over the next year or so. I don't want to just jump to conclusions and say that this is definitely the problem. Now, while I was tinkering around in here, I also noticed this broken light bar connector. The 2 prongs were jammed into a Molex plug down here. Now, this whole thing can get in the bin. It doesn't look right. Maybe there's a short being caused somewhere by this. It doesn't look like this is how the connector would have looked. Let's get the graphics card out of here too, just so that it's easier to inspect the other connectors and access the chunky heatsink easier. A thumb screw at the back, followed by the removal of another single screw, releases the card. In this case, a 6GB GTX 1660 Super. This is pretty clean as well, minimal dust around the fans. The heatsink itself, the Wraith, uses one of those old school latch mechanisms that you may be familiar with if you ever had an AM3 system. A bit fiddly, but not as annoying as when we come to put it back on. But that's a problem for future Steve to deal with. Present Steve has to deal with this absolute truckload of thermal paste. My goodness, if they ever announce a thermal paste shortage, well, I think I know where it all went. I don't think the camera is effectively picking up the pure thickness of this paste-based layer on top of the CPU and on the heatsink. It's all over me as well. Turns out the underneath and sides of the CPU had some paste on too. I used a soft toothbrush to get it out from the pins. This could actually be the cause of our shutdown and restart problem. Now the paste wasn't dry, so if it's been applied recently, like just before selling, then this might not be the cause of our problem at all, but it certainly needs to be addressed. So I've just spent 10 minutes getting thermal paste out of my eyebrow, which I don't even know how it got there. There was just so much of it that it got everywhere, and I must have scratched my eyebrow, and I thought that's a bit sticky, and there was thermal paste in my eyebrow. So that's not happened before, but first time for everything, I guess. And yeah, there was just way too much thermal paste all over the place in that system. When it comes to thermal paste, just like a pea-sized amount is generally fine. Just squish it out of the syringe or the packet or whatever it's in into a little pea-sized clump on top of it and smush the heatsink down on top and then screw it in or lock it in place or whatever. That's going to be fine. You don't need to spend time finger painting the thermal paste all over the place or spraying it around with a credit card or whatever else. I generally find that a pea-sized amount right in the middle, unless it's one of those massive old Xeon or Threadripper processors or something, then I think a pea-sized amount for your standard desktop consumer chips is absolutely fine. It's the method I always use, and it's the method that always seems to be perfectly effective. I fixed PCs before just by taking them apart and putting them back together without changing anything, so it could be that regardless of the paste all over the place or the weird looking broken light bar wires, this could have worked just fine after a simple disassembly. But we won't speak too soon. I've put everything back in place, including the original Colink power supply, rotated the front and rear fans just to hide the wires a bit better, and it's time to hit the power button. Success. Well, we're back to where we were about 7 minutes ago. The system turns on, but how long for? Well, fast forward a few hours and so far so good. Maybe it was the removal of the paste from every conceivable orifice, the binning of the broken light bar, or the simple fact that a disassemble and reassemble could mean I better secured all the power and case header cables. But one thing's for sure, this is now working perfectly. I even jumped into a couple of games and all went well. This is with the Colink PSU back in the system too, by the way. It seems to be doing a fine job for this system, but then again our graphics card isn't too power hungry, nor is the CPU at stock speeds. Of course the C-Sonic was on standby in case the Colink went up like a bowl of Rice Krispies, snap, crackle and pop, but all is well so far. So we'll jump into a few more games and see how this configuration holds up. The 1800X was a brilliant choice for productivity and content creation back in 2017. I remember it being praised as such, though it was usually outpaced by Intel's 4-core 8-thread Kaby Lake i7s, or in some cases i5s when it came to gaming. The 1660 Super is a 6GB card that can be found for less than £100 here in the UK and is potentially ideal for lower cost 1080p gaming setups. Here's how the two work together along with the 16 gigs of dual channel 3000MHz DDR4 RAM. So fast forward a day and the PC has been just fine with no freezes or restarts. So we'll move on to Arc Raiders next. 1080p with a medium preset, feeling a little bit daring here. I thought we may be able to push things to medium and retain 60 FPS. Turns out I was right here because we got 66 frames per second overall with a 1% low of 39 and a 0.1% low of 29. So it was actually pretty consistent as well. As we can see again, the CPU has no problem hitting its all-core clock speed of 3 3.7 GHz out of the box. I haven't tried any overclocking, as I stated at the start, staying nice and cool with the included Wraith cooler. And in this case, it's the 1660 Super that is the limitation here. That is hitting its full potential as part of this PC. In some cases, I think the Ryzen will become the limitation, even with this a sort of modern lower end card in the PC. Cyberpunk 2077 next with the low preset. Now this does retain a few medium options. Again, the GPU is the limitation a lot of the time, but there will be moments whereby the CPU usage spikes, particularly in those busier downtown zones, and it's going to cause the GPU usage to fall a little bit, and therefore cause some dips and drops with the frame time graph. That being said, it wasn't too inconsistent. We're looking at a very nice 69 FPS average, a 1% low of 43 and a 0.1% low of 32. So this isn't a bad configuration at all. I certainly could have pushed Fortnite a little bit harder. We're running the medium preset here with TAA. This is in DX12 mode as well, which seems to be a bit smoother, especially with newer cards, averaging 161 FPS here, with 113 as that 1% low, and a 0.1% low figure of 82. So fairly smooth over my 20-minute or so gameplay session. Fortnite can cause some issues with older CPUs, but I think because this is an 8-core 16-thread chip, it's holding up just fine. Again, the 1660 Super is pretty much being fully utilised, at least most of the time. Next up we have the enhanced version of GTA 5 running with FSR3 at native. Reason being is that it looks a lot sharper than TAA, plus we can afford the extra frame sacrifice here because we were still getting over 100 frames per second, 102 overall, a 1% low of 82 and a 0.1% low of 68, so a pretty smooth experience here today. Again, the 1660 Super, pretty much the limiting factor here. The Ryzen 7 1800 just sitting back and relaxing at 50 to 60% usage here, still hitting its all-core clock speed out of the box. Kingdom Come Deliverance next at medium. I think I was being a little too daring here. This would have run a lot better at low, especially because there were a few little spikes here and there. I think this is a VRAM limitation more than anything. This is a 6 gig card, and when we start to encroach on that, we do see some drops in and around town. That's reflected in the 0.1% low, which was just 10 FPS, but overall we saw 80 on average, a 1% low of 61. And yeah, I think performance was pretty good. FSR 3.1 quality helped alleviate some of the issues a little bit, but 60 FPS was still achievable at native resolution too, if you'd prefer to play that way. Resident Evil Requiem next. This is a pretty demanding outdoor area, more intensive than those indoor scenes here, and as such the frame rate is going to be a little lower. A very nice 69 here as the average, a 1% low of 53 and a 0.1% low of 17. Again, this was far more GPU intensive, especially on the 1660 Super, pretty much hitting its full potential here. And as you can see, the game still looks pretty good with the lowest settings, albeit with TAA switched on just to eliminate some of those jagged edges. I couldn't help myself, I had to test Starfield. I've been getting back into this lately since it released on PlayStation 5. I've been hearing a lot about Starfield. I thought I'd jump back in, and maybe I'll keep it in the benchmarks, maybe not, I don't know. It's a good one to test here because it can stress the CPU quite hard in busier areas like Aquila here, where we're going to see drops in the GPU utilisation. But even so, with FSR3 enabled and 80% scaling, we saw a pretty respectable 48 FPS. I think considering the game, that's not too bad. And when we look at those percentile lows of 35 and 32, it was a pretty solid effort overall. It seems as though wiping off the ton of thermal paste and removing almost everything and putting it back together has resolved our issues here. As far as the setup itself, the 1800X and 1660 Super seems to be a fairly decent low-cost pairing. I'd probably recommend something a little newer in 2026, maybe a Ryzen 3600. That just seems to be the go-to for those wanting to put together something with a smaller budget. And it's a chip that's still going to hold up fairly well in most modern games. But there we are. Thank you very much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, leave your thoughts down below, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.